Sometimes,
I can't
the
believe this is
smallest
happening.
voices carry the loudest
I know this
truths.
is hard.
It was a quiet
You need
afternoon
to
in a small
understand what
American
happened.
town when a trembling 7-year-old girl picked up the phone, tears rolling down her cheeks, and whispered to 911, "The bus driver did it again?" What happened next would leave not only the police, but the entire town utterly speechless. Today, we'll uncover the story behind that call. A story not of crime or fear, but of kindness, misunderstanding, and the power of compassion that changed many lives forever. Before we begin, I just want to send warm wishes to all of you listening. May peace fill your heart wherever you are. Tell me, from which country are you listening, and what time is it right now? Late afternoon lights slanted through the windows of the yellow school bus as it rolled down the narrow streets of Asheville, North Carolina. Maple leaves swirled across the windshield, catching the fading sun like bits of copper. Inside, 7-year-old Hazel Quinn pressed her small lunchbox against her knees, listening to the steady growl of the engine and the faint hum of the radio that always played old country tunes Mr. Hayes liked. Every song sounded like it came from another lifetime. Mr. Leonard Hayes, 56, sat straight behind the wheel. His cap shadowed his gray-blue eyes, his hands moved calmly, practiced over the steering wheel. To most children, he was just the quiet bus driver who never raised his voice. To Hazel, lately, he was the man who kept taking her lunch. Each afternoon, she'd watch him pause at the front, open her box, lift out the sandwich her mother had packed, and hand it to Eli Thompson, the boy from the first seat. Mr. Hayes would murmur something. Hazel could barely hear something about sharing and doing good, but all she saw was the empty space where her food had been. The bus rattled past the red brick houses of Maple Grove Elementary. The smell of peanut butter still clung to Hazel's fingers. She kept thinking about her mother, Grace Quinn, who woke before dawn to spread that thin layer of peanut butter on 2 slices of bread. "It's special," Grace always said, trimming off the crusts. Hazel never told her that lately. She hadn't been the one eating it. As the bus slowed near her stop, Hazel leaned into the aisle, trying to catch Mr. Hayes's eye. "Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "That was my sandwich." He nodded once, not unkindly. "I know, sweetheart. Some days, sharing helps more than keeping." It wasn't an answer she understood. The doors hissed open, cold air rushing in. She stepped down, watching the bus pull away, its taillights blinking through the mist. On the rear window, she caught her own reflection in the glass, tiny, pale, and puzzled, superimposed on the driver's faint silhouette. The image clung to her, even as the bus disappeared beyond the corner. At home, the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the heating vents. Hazel set her lunchbox on the table and opened it. Inside was a folded note written in careful block letters. "Be kind. No sandwich, no apple. Just those 2 words." Her eyes stung. She slid the paper back inside, closed the lid, and climbed onto the couch where the fading daylight turned the room the color of old honey. From the street below, she could hear laughter from a passing group of high schoolers, the low whine of a motorcycle, the ordinary noises of a town winding down for supper. Somewhere out there, Mr. Hayes was probably driving home, humming along with that radio of his, never imagining the confusion sitting like a knot in Hazel's small chest. She pulled the thin blanket over her knees, whispering to the lunchbox, as if it could answer her. He did it again. Her voice broke, a tiny sound swallowed by the ticking clock on the wall. The light in the kitchen flickered once before, settling into a steady glow. Outside, the last bus of the day rumbled past, leaving behind the smell of exhaust and the first hint of evening rain. When Grace Quinn came home that evening, the apartment smelled faintly of bleach and peppermint from the hospital corridors she'd walked all day. She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes, rubbing the back of her neck. The old clock above the stove read 8:30. Hazel was still awake, drawing quietly at the kitchen table. A single lamp lit her face. Its yellow glow made her look older somehow. Grace smiled, weary but loving. "Hey, Peanut, you still up?" Hazel nodded without looking up. "Mom, why does Mr. Hayes take my lunch?" The question hit Grace harder than she expected. She hung her coat slowly. "What do you mean, honey?" "He opens my box on the bus. He gives it to Eli." Hazel's pencil trembled on the paper. "He says it helps more than keeping." Grace knelt beside her. The smell of antiseptic clung to her scrubs. "Maybe he's just trying to teach sharing," she offered gently. but her own voice lacked certainty. Did Eli not have a lunch? He always has one. 2, I think. Hazel's eyes lifted, gray and bright under the lamplight. You made mine special. Grace brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. I'll talk to the school tomorrow, okay? Don't worry about it tonight. But she knew she wouldn't have the time. The next shift began at 6 a.m. She kissed Hazel's forehead and said the line every parent working double shifts has said 1,000 times. Get some sleep, sweetheart. Tomorrow'll be better. Hazel nodded, pretending to believe it. After her mother disappeared into the bedroom, Hazel packed her crayons away. The drawing she'd made of a yellow bus crossing a bridge remained on the table. Beside it lay the folded note from her lunchbox. The words, "Be kind," seemed to glow in the lamplight, simple yet impossible. She traced them with her finger until her eyes blurred. Rain began tapping against the window, slow at first, then steadier. The sound filled the apartment like a lullaby gone wrong. Hazel stood by the glass, watching the parking lot shimmer under the streetlight. Across the way, a delivery truck idled, headlights cutting through the drizzle. For a second, she imagined the bus parked there instead. Mr. Hayes inside, sipping from his dented thermos, humming along to his old songs. She could almost hear his low voice. Some days, sharing helps more than keeping. How? She whispered to the glass. But what if sharing hurts? A thin fog crept over the hill beyond the complex, softening the shape of the street lamps. Somewhere in that quiet, she decided something small and stubborn. If adults wouldn't understand, maybe someone else would. Maybe the people on the radio, the ones who answered calls for help. She climbed onto the couch again, clutching her lunchbox. The clock struck 9. Its chime echoing through the small living room. She imagined herself speaking into a phone. Please help me. The bus driver did it again. The words sounded both brave and frightened in her mind. On the counter, Grace's pager buzzed a reminder of another long night at the hospital. She didn't hear it. Sleep had already claimed her in the next room. Hazel tiptoed over, switched it off, and whispered, "Good night, Mom." The rain eased to a mist. A car passed on the road, sending ripples through a puddle that reflected the red glow of the stoplight. The world outside looked washed clean, but Hazel's small heart still felt heavy. She crawled into bed, clutching the lunchbox like a secret. From her pillow, she could see the faint silhouette of the bus route map taped to the wall. Each line was a road she knew by heart, Main Street, Riverbend, Maple Lane, yet now they felt mysterious, like paths leading somewhere grown-ups had forgotten. The night settled fully. The hum of the refrigerator, the sigh of the wind, and the occasional horn from the interstate folded together into the lullaby of Asheville at rest. Hazel's eyelids fluttered. Before sleep took her, she thought she heard a bus engine far away, steady and patient, carrying other children safely home. She whispered into the dark, more to herself than anyone else. He did it again. And in that soft apartment filled with rain, light, and distant echoes, those 4 words hung between the rooms, waiting like the first note of a song no one yet knew how to finish. By the time the sun dipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, the hospital parking lot shimmered under a pale gold haze. Grace Quinn adjusted her badge and stepped into Mission Health Hospital, the automatic doors sighing open like tired lungs. The scent of antiseptic mixed with coffee drifted down the corridor. Another double shift. Another night of holding strangers' hands while her own daughter slept alone. She checked her watch 5:47 p.m. and slipped her phone into her pocket. A text blinked on the screen. "Mom," he took it again. Grace stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then the intercom called her name, summoning her to pediatrics. The text went unanswered. Down the hall, the nurse's station buzzed with quiet motion, shoes squeaking, machines humming, laughter too soft to last. Nurse Patricia, her longtime friend, handed Grace a clipboard and whispered, "You look like you've been running a marathon since Monday." Grace smiled thinly. "Feels like it. I'll rest after Thanksgiving." Patricia arched an eyebrow. "You said that last year." They shared the kind of laugh tired women use to hide worry. Grace glanced toward the window where Asheville's skyline blurred in the dusk. Somewhere beyond those hills was Hazel, probably eating dinner alone. That thought pressed like a stone against her chest. At home, the little apartment on Cedar View Lane was quiet, but for the hum of the heater. Hazel had warmed leftover soup on the stove. The steam fogged the window, drawing tiny rivers down the glass. She ate in silence, her legs swinging above the chair, then left half the bowl untouched. The phone buzzed again, a hospital reminder from her mother. She sighed, pushing the bowl aside, and pulled a piece of paper from her backpack. In blue crayon, she drew the yellow bus, the tall man in the cap, and herself sitting behind the big maple tree near Street Luke's church. The picture had small words written on top. "I don't want to go home." Back at the hospital, Grace walked the pediatric wing with slow, deliberate steps. The rhythmic beeping of heart monitors filled the room like a second heartbeat. A child coughed softly, and Grace adjusted the blanket. She loved children, every nurse did, but sometimes she wondered how she could care for everyone else's while her own waited in the quiet. Patricia appeared again near the supply cart. "Your daughter's a strong one," she said kindly. 7, right? They bounce back easy at that age." Grace nodded, smiling out of habit. "Yeah, she's strong." But in her mind, she saw Hazel's small hands, the neat sandwich halves, and the empty lunchbox that came home too light. Near midnight, she finally sat down in the break room, pouring herself lukewarm coffee from the pot. The window there faced the street. Rain shimmered on the pavement, catching reflections of headlights. It looked like the same drizzle Hazel had watched from home earlier that evening. Two worlds, separated by miles, breathing in the same soft rain. Grace rubbed her temples. She should call the school tomorrow, maybe talk to the bus driver herself. But then, the thought of asking for time off felt like an impossible luxury. Bills didn't wait. Rent didn't forgive. A nurse poked her head in. "Grace, ER needs a hand. You're up." She straightened, drained the cup, and pushed her worries down deep where nurses kept them somewhere between the heart and the stomach. As she stepped into the hall, the fluorescent lights seemed harsher than before. Outside, the rain had faded to a fine mist that softened the streetlights. Back home on Cedarview Lane, Hazel sat cross-legged on the living room rug, her blanket pulled up around her shoulders. The TV flickered in the corner, showing a Thanksgiving commercial, smiling families, passing plates of turkey and laughing around long tables. She turned the volume down until the only sound was the steady hum of the heater. On the couch lay her mother's phone, left behind again. Hazel reached for it hesitantly, tracing the smudged screen with one finger. The wallpaper was a photo of the two of them taken last spring at the park. Grace's tired eyes brightened by the sunlight, Hazel's hair flying in the wind. It felt like a long time ago, a world where her mother didn't look so exhausted. She scrolled through the messages, reading old ones that made her smile. "Good job on your spelling test," or "pancakes tomorrow, promise." Then she found the last unread text, the one she had sent earlier. "Mom," he took it again. Beneath it sat a gray bubble that said only, "Delivered." No reply. Hazel set the phone down gently and walked to the window. The glass was cold against her palms. Outside, the glow from the streetlight made the puddles sparkle like tiny stars. A bus rolled by on the main road, slower than usual, empty seats lit like lanterns in the mist. Her heart clenched. She thought of Mr. Hayes's calm face, the way he said, "Some days, sharing helps more than keeping." She didn't understand why grown-ups always said things that sounded kind but felt wrong. If he wanted to help, why did he have to take from her? And if being kind meant losing what little she had, maybe kindness wasn't what everyone said it was. The apartment door creaked with the wind. Hazel pulled her blanket tighter. The silence grew thick around her until she could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, steady as a heartbeat. Each tick felt like a question she didn't know how to answer. She turned back to the phone. Its screen had gone dark, showing her small reflection. Her eyes were swollen from holding in tears. Her mouth set in the determined line of a child who's decided something for the first time. She picked up the phone, pressed the button, and watched the light return. The numbers glowed softly. 9, then 1, then 1. Her thumb hovered over the green call button. The idea frightened her. Calling 911 was what people did when something terrible happened, when cars crashed or fires started. But wasn't it terrible that nobody listened? That someone kept taking her lunch? Her mother was always gone, and no one seemed to care? The thought made her chest tighten. She placed the phone beside her, too scared to press it yet, but unwilling to walk away. "They'll believe me," she whispered into the quiet, as if saying it out loud could make it true. From the bedroom came the soft sound of her mother turning in her sleep. Grace murmured something Hazel couldn't make out. The sound was gentle, like a wish. Hazel tiptoed to her mother's door, peeking in. The room was dim except for the faint light from the hall falling across Grace's face. Hazel wanted to wake her, to crawl into bed and feel her warmth, but she didn't. Grown-ups needed sleep. That's what they always said. So instead, she whispered, "Good night, Mom," and closed the door quietly. Back in the living room, she sat on the couch again, hugging her lunchbox to her chest. The heater clicked off, leaving a hush so complete she could hear her own breathing. The phone still lay beside her, its screen now dark again, but she knew what it said, 3 glowing numbers waiting to change everything. Hazel lay down, watching the ceiling. The city's faint light painting shifting patterns across it. In the stillness, she imagined the bus again, the seats empty, the driver's hands steady on the wheel as the town passed outside. She thought of the note, "Be kind," and though she didn't fully understand, she knew that tomorrow she couldn't stay silent anymore. Her eyelids grew heavy, but her hand stayed curled around the phone, as if the act of holding it gave her courage. The clock ticked toward midnight. In a few hours, the morning would come, and with it, a call that would change everything. The rain had turned steady by late afternoon, washing the streets of Asheville in silver light. At the Buncombe County 911 Dispatch Center, the fluorescent bulbs buzzed softly overhead. Rows of monitors glowed in the half-dark room, each one showing maps, phone lines, and blinking signals of other people's emergencies. Most calls that day had been routine fender benders, false alarms, the occasional heart scare. Nothing out of the ordinary, until the little girl's voice came through. Dispatcher Janet Williams, a mother of 3 with silver hair pinned in a tight bun, answered as she always did, calm, professional. 911, what's your emergency? A pause. Then a breath that sounded like wind over a phone line. Please help me, a tiny voice said. The bus driver. He did it again. Janet's pen froze above her notepad. Her tone softened instantly. Sweetheart, are you hurt? Can you tell me your name? The voice trembled. I'm Hazel. Hazel Quinn. Another sniffle then. I'm hiding. Behind the big tree. The one near Street Luke's church. Janet's eyes flicked to the clock, 3:47 p.m. School dismissal time. She typed rapidly, flagging a potential child in danger call. Okay, Hazel, stay right where you are. Are you alone? I don't want to go home, Hazel whispered. Mom's working. I can't tell her what he did. The room shifted around Janet, every background sound fading. You're doing the right thing, sweetheart, she said softly. I'm sending someone to you right now. Can you see any cars? Maybe a street sign? Miller Street, Hazel murmured after a pause. By the oak. The bus just left. Janet scribbled the words and hit a key that sent the alert flashing to Detective Erin Calloway, who was sitting in her cruiser not far from downtown. Erin's radio crackled to life. Possible child emergency. Female minor. Location Miller Street, near Street Luke's. Caller hiding behind large oak tree. She started the engine, siren silent but lights flashing red against the wet pavement. Years on the force had taught her that the quiet calls, the ones said in whispers, were the ones that haunted you. Traffic parted slowly. Asheville's narrow streets gleamed with water. Reflections of shop signs rippling like oil paint. Erin gripped the wheel tighter, her jaw set. She had a daughter not much older than 7. The thought made her foot press harder on the gas. Back at dispatch, Janet kept Hazel on the line. Do you see my friend coming? She'll have a blue jacket that says police. Her name is Erin. I don't see her yet. Hazel's breathing quickened. It's cold. Hold tight, baby. She's almost there. Janet spoke like a lullaby, voice low and steady, her free hand clenching around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. Through the drizzle, Erin's headlights cut through the trees on Miller Street. She slowed near Street Luke's, where the old church bell hung silent against the gray sky. Then she saw a small pink backpack peeking from behind the trunk of a massive oak. The little figure crouched low, knees tucked under, hair plastered to her face. Erin stepped out, letting the rain soak her shoulders. She approached carefully, voice gentle. Hazel, my name's Erin. Janet sent me. You're safe now. The child looked up, eyes wide, wet lashes trembling. Are you going to arrest him? Who, honey? Erin knelt to meet her gaze. Mr. Hayes. The bus driver. He did something bad. Erin's stomach tightened. Can you tell me what he did? Hazel hesitated, hugging her backpack tighter. He gave my lunch away. Again. For a moment, the rain was the only sound. The child's sobs blended with it, small and aching. Erin reached into her pocket, offering a tissue, though it was already damp from the weather. You were very brave to call us, she said quietly. Hazel nodded but didn't speak again. She just pressed the lunchbox against her chest, as if it contained something fragile the world couldn't see. Erin crouched beside Hazel a while longer, waiting for the shivers in the little girl's shoulders to ease. The rain had softened to a mist, hanging like breath between them. Hazel's backpack dripped steadily onto the wet leaves. When Erin offered her hand, the child hesitated, then placed her tiny fingers in the officer's palm. They were ice cold. It's all right, Erin said softly. Let's get you out of the rain. The police cruiser was warm, smelling faintly of leather and peppermint gum. Hazel slid into the back seat, staring out the window as droplets chased each other down the glass. Erin started the heater and turned the radio volume low. The familiar dispatcher's voice came through. Unit 24, status check. Erin lifted the mic. Child found safe, age approximately 7. Requesting parent contact. Copy that. Mother is Grace Quinn, working at Mission Health, Janet replied. She doesn't know yet. Erin exhaled. Tell her the girl's okay. We'll bring her home soon. She glanced into the rearview mirror. Hazel's reflection was small and solemn. Hazel, can you tell me where you live? Cedarview Lane, she murmured. By the laundry place. Got it. We'll go there now. They drove through the quiet streets, past the diner with its neon sign flickering, open late. Through the window, Erin could see families inside, mothers cutting pie, fathers pouring coffee. She wondered when Grace had last sat down to a meal with her daughter. Probably too long ago. At the next red light, Hazel spoke without looking up. Are you a mom too? Erin smiled faintly. I am. I have a daughter your age. Does she eat lunch every day? The question hung in the air like fog. She does, Erin answered carefully. But sometimes she forgets her snacks. I guess we all need help now and then. Hazel turned to the window again, watching the wet reflection slide past. She didn't reply. When they reached the small apartment complex, Erin parked under a street lamp and shut off the engine. The light turned the raindrops gold. Your mom's working late, she said gently, but we'll let her know you're safe. And tomorrow, we'll talk to Mr. Hayes together, okay? Hazel's face tightened. He's nice sometimes, but he shouldn't take my food. Erin nodded. That's fair. We'll find out why he did. They climbed the steps to the apartment door. Hazel's keychain jingled with a tiny plastic heart as she unlocked it. Inside, the air was still warm from the heater. Erin set her notepad on the counter while Hazel slipped off her shoes. The small space told its own story. A pile of folded hospital scrubs, a half-empty coffee cup, drawings taped on the fridge. On the kitchen table sat a paper labeled Maple Grove Elementary Reading Practice. The name Hazel Quinn was written neatly across the top. Erin traced the letters with her eyes, her throat tightening just a little. Hazel, she said quietly, you did the right thing calling us. Sometimes it's hard to know when to ask for help, but you were brave. The girl stood by the couch, clutching her lunchbox. Will he be mad? Mr. Hayes? Erin asked. No, I don't think so. We just need to talk to him, make sure everything's okay. Hazel nodded, but didn't seem convinced. She climbed onto the couch, setting the lunchbox beside her. Like a pet she needed to guard, Erin made a note in her pad, then called dispatch again to report the child home and safe. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Before leaving, Erin crouched near the couch once more. Is there anything you want me to tell your mom? Hazel thought for a long moment, then said softly, Tell her I'm sorry I called, but I didn't know what else to do. Erin's smile was faint but warm. You don't need to be sorry, Hazel. Sometimes telling the truth feels scary, but it's the only way things get better. She turned toward the door. Hazel watched her go, the glow from the hallway spilling across the room for a brief, golden moment. Then the door closed, and the apartment was quiet again, except for the whisper of the heater. Hazel lay back, clutching her lunchbox, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow, only that grown-ups were finally listening. Outside, Detective Erin Calloway paused on the steps. She looked up at the cloudy sky, rainwater dripping from her jacket hood. Something about the little girl's trembling voice lingered in her mind. She'd heard thousands of calls in 15 years, but this one had weight, the kind that stayed. She pulled her collar close, glancing down the empty street where the school bus would pass in the morning. "We'll find out, Hazel," she murmured to the night. "We'll find out who this man really is." And in the faint reflection of the puddles, red and blue lights shimmered like quiet promises against the wet asphalt. By the time Detective Erin Calloway reached the end of Willow Creek Road, the rain had stopped, leaving the world wrapped in the smell of wet pine and cold earth. The GPS arrow blinked over a cluster of small houses, each one crouched beneath sagging porches and vines. Her headlights swept across mailbox numbers until they landed on the one she was looking for, #47 Hayes. She parked and sat for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Through the windshield, she saw a dim light glowing behind lace curtains. Somewhere inside that house lived the man whose name a frightened little girl had whispered over a 911 call. When she stepped out, gravel crunched under her boots. A dog barked distantly, and the mountains loomed behind the rooftops like old guardians. Erin climbed the porch steps and knocked. The door opened before she could announce herself. A man stood there, tall but slightly stooped, his gray sweater patched at one elbow. Mr. Leonard Hayes, age 56. His face was lined but kind, his eyes the color of a winter sky. He seemed neither surprised nor afraid. "You're here because of the little girl, aren't you?" he said quietly. Erin studied him a moment. "Hazel Quinn," she replied. "You know her?" He nodded once. "She rides my bus. Sweet kid, smart, a bit lonely maybe." He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in. No sense freezing out there." The inside of the house was warmer than she expected, filled with the scent of tea and old books. A kettle whistled softly on the stove. The walls were lined with wooden shelves crowded with framed photographs. Children in school uniforms, smiling from behind frosting-covered cupcakes. Drawings made with crayon. Postcards from decades of classes. He gestured toward them. 20 years of driving," he said with a wistful pride. "They're all my kids, one way or another." Erin glanced at the photos while he poured tea. Every frame carried a small note, a date, or a scrawled, "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." She almost smiled until her gaze froze on one photo that didn't look like the rest. It hung above the fireplace, slightly larger than the others. A little girl in a summer dress, standing beside a school bus. Her smile was shy, her hair tied back with a ribbon, and she looked, impossibly, like Hazel. Mr. Hayes noticed her staring. His hand trembled as he set the teapot down. "That's my daughter," he said, voice low. "Her name was Lila." Erin turned to face him. "Was?" He nodded, eyes clouding. "She passed. 8 years ago. Car accident on a foggy morning. Same road I drive every day now." The clock on the wall ticked once, sharp in the silence. Erin exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Hayes." He waved a hand gently. "You don't need to be. I still see her in the faces of those kids. Every time I start that bus, it feels like she's with me again." The kettle let out one last hiss before going silent. Erin took a slow sip of the tea he'd poured mint, and something faintly floral. "Can you tell me about today?" she asked. "The little girl said you did something that scared her." He smiled sadly. "I took her sandwich." Erin raised an eyebrow. "That's what she told us. Why?" He turned toward the window. Beyond it, the yard sloped down into darkness. "Because sometimes kindness doesn't look the way people expect." She waited for him to continue, but he said nothing more. The sound of rain dripping from the gutters filled the space between them. Erin's instincts stirred something in the man's calmness, his precision, that quiet conviction. She wasn't sure if it was guilt or grief she saw behind his eyes. "Mr. Hayes," she said carefully, "you understand we have to speak with Hazel's mother about this?" "Of course." He glanced toward the photo again. "Just be gentle with the child. She reminds me too much of my Lila." The name lingered in the air like a prayer. Erin finished her tea, set the cup down, and walked toward the photographs once more. Every smiling face, every thank you note testament to decades of care. But the image of Lila, framed and alone, drew her gaze again and again. It was then she noticed something small beneath it, a second frame, tucked almost out of sight. Inside was a picture of a school bus with a line of children stepping aboard. One of them was Hazel. The photo looked recent. Erin leaned closer to the small photograph. The print was new, glossy. Hazel stood in the line of children waiting to board the bus, her pink backpack hanging off one shoulder. Behind the wheel, through the open door, was Mr. Hayes, captured mid-smile. Someone else must have taken it from the sidewalk. Beneath the photo, a handwritten note read in looping script, "For the children who remind us to keep going." "Did you take this?" Erin asked quietly. Hayes followed her gaze and nodded. "I like to remember them. Every year I take a picture of my riders. Some of those kids have no one else to keep their memories for them." His voice cracked just slightly on the last words. Erin could feel the weight behind them, the kind that doesn't come from guilt, but from years of carrying something heavier than silence. Still, procedure was procedure. "Hazel's mother will have questions," she said gently. "So will the school. They might not understand the way you mean it." "I know." Hayes rubbed the back of his neck, the gesture of a man too tired to defend himself. "But I couldn't just stand by. You saw her lunch? One slice of bread, barely any peanut butter. She tells everyone she isn't hungry, but you can see it in her eyes. She's trying not to make her mother feel bad." Erin let out a quiet breath. "So you gave it to another child?" "To a boy named Eli," he said. "His mother packs extra food every day. She told me to share it if I found anyone who needed it. So I switched them. The boy eats the thin sandwich without complaint. Hazel gets Eli's lunch, though she doesn't know it yet. I thought it would keep her pride intact." He paused, looking toward the window where the night pressed softly against the glass. "I suppose I should have explained, but explaining sometimes ruins the little good a secret can do." Erin studied him in the dim lamplight. He didn't look like a man who hurt children. He looked like a man who'd already lost too much to hurt anyone again. And yet, his way of helping had frightened a little girl, enough to call for help. Her gaze drifted to the large photograph above the fireplace once more, Lila's smile frozen in time. The resemblance to Hazel was uncanny. The same delicate jawline, the same soft hair curling near the ears, even the same spark in the eyes, though Lila's had been captured in a brighter season. "Your daughter," Erin said softly. "She was about Hazel's age when she passed?" "Exactly her age," he whispered. 7. A small silence fell. Outside, a car passed slowly down the road, its headlights flashing across the curtains and scattering gold light over the photos. Erin turned back toward him, choosing her words carefully. "You said Hazel reminds you of her." Hayes nodded. "Sometimes it's almost too much. Same laugh. Same way of twisting her hair when she's nervous. When I look in that mirror," he gestured toward the window, its dark reflection holding both their faces, "I almost see Lila again." Erin's eyes followed the gesture. For a fleeting moment, the window caught the reflection of the photograph behind her, superimposing Hazel's image over Lila's. It sent a chill down her spine. She set her teacup aside. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her tone steady but low, "why do you have a recent picture of Hazel framed in your living room?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the mantel, tracing the edge of the frame with trembling fingers. "Because," he said finally, "I needed to remember that I could still help someone, even if I couldn't help my own." The words landed softly, but they hung in the air like smoke. Erin swallowed, unsure whether she felt compassion or warning. The detective in her noted every detail, the personal photo, the language of loss, the child involved. The mother in her simply felt a pang of sorrow. She rose slowly. "Tomorrow, I'll need you to come by the station, just to clear things up." "Oh?" He nodded, eyes still on the photo. "I'll be there." Erin reached for the door. The night air rushed in, cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of rain-washed cedar. She turned back one last time. "Mr." Hayes stood by the window, the lamplight outlining his figure, the reflection of his daughter's photograph glowing beside him. "Who is she, Mr. Hayes?" Erin asked softly. He looked up, eyes glistening. "My daughter," he said. "My Lila." "Oh." The wind stirred the curtains as if the house itself sighed. Erin stepped into the dark, the echo of his words following her down the porch steps. Somewhere behind her, through the thin lace curtains. The man's shadow stayed still, framed by the flicker of lamplight like someone waiting for forgiveness that never quite came. Morning came slowly to Asheville, slipping through the clouds like a careful secret. The rain had stopped, leaving the world damp and bright. At the edge of town, sunlight filtered through fog that clung to the mountainsides, turning every pine needle into a spark. Detective Erin Calloway parked outside the Hayes house again, engine humming softly. She'd hardly slept. The image of that photograph, Hazel's face beside the word daughter, had followed her through the night. Inside, Leonard Hayes was already awake. Through the window, she saw him at his kitchen table, 2 teacups steaming, as if he'd known she would come. When she knocked, he simply nodded toward the empty chair across from him. "Didn't think you'd wait long," he said. Erin sat down. "You knew I'd be back." He stirred his tea, smiling faintly. "You're a mother. I could tell by the way you talk to the little one. Mothers don't let go of a question until it makes sense." His calmness unsettled her. She flipped open her notebook. "Mr. Hayes, we just need to clarify a few things. Hazel told me you've been taking her lunch for a couple of weeks now." He nodded. "That's right. Why?" He leaned back, hands wrapped around his cup. "Because every day she climbs onto that bus with a brave face and an empty stomach. One thin slice of white bread, a little peanut butter. That's all she has. No drink, no fruit. Sometimes she pretends to chew longer so the other kids won't notice." Erin hesitated. "So you gave her food?" He shook his head. "Not directly. Kids hate feeling like charity. There's a boy, Eli Thompson. His mother packs too much sandwiches, juice, fruit, cookies. She told me once, if some child forgets their lunch, share it, Leonard. So I did. I gave Hazel his lunch and handed him hers. He's a good kid, never complained." Erin watched him quietly. "But Hazel thought you were punishing her," he sighed. "I know. I should have told her. But I wanted her to keep her pride. Sometimes good intentions look wrong from the outside." His words carried the weary rhythm of truth. Erin could almost see the scene play out, the bus rumbling through fog. A man trying to fix what the world kept breaking. A little girl, too young to understand the language of sacrifice. She looked around the living room again. Morning light poured over the framed photographs, catching dust motes in the air like floating memories. "You keep every picture," she murmured. Hayes' eyes followed hers. "They remind me that I still matter to someone. When my wife left after Lila's accident, the house got too quiet, so I filled it with voices that wouldn't leave." Erin's gaze softened. "Lila looks a lot like Hazel," he smiled sadly. "That's what I thought when I first saw her. Same eyes. The same way she tilts her head when she listens. I didn't mean to get attached, but she felt like a second chance." Erin closed her notebook, folding her hands. "Mr. Hayes, I don't think you meant harm, but you understand how this could look, an older man giving food away in secret, taking photos of a child?" He nodded slowly. "I understand. That's why I called the school myself this morning. I told them everything." That surprised her. "You did?" "Yes. I figured honesty's the only road left worth driving." Erin almost smiled at the word driving. "What did they say?" "They're sending someone over to verify her lunch status. There's been a paperwork mistake. She should have been getting free meals this whole time." He looked down at his hands, the tea cooling between them. "Her mama works 3 jobs, 2 at the hospital and 1 cleaning offices on weekends. People think parents like that are careless, but they're just tired." Erin nodded, a pang tugging at her chest. She remembered her own years of single motherhood, the nights of cold coffee and guilt. "You pay attention, don't you?" "I see things most people overlook," he said softly. "I guess that's what happens when you spend your life watching the road from behind a windshield." Outside, the sun rose higher, lighting the tops of the wet trees. The world seemed freshly washed, but the air inside the house still carried the ache of something unhealed. Erin looked again at the photograph of Lila, then at the one of Hazel. It was as though grief had folded time in half, making 2 lives overlap. Hayes followed her gaze. "When I lost Lila, I promised myself I'd never let another child go hungry, if I could help it. I suppose I broke that promise in a strange way." Erin's throat tightened. "No," she said gently. "You kept it, just not how anyone expected." For the first time that morning, Hayes smiled, not the small, polite curve of habit, but something genuine, fragile as the sunlight spilling through the curtains. The morning light drifted gently through the curtains, laying soft gold across the wooden floor. Erin lingered in the Hayes living room, her pen idle above the notepad. Something about this house, its quietness, its framed memories, made her feel less like a detective and more like a witness to someone else's unfinished prayer. Hayes rose slowly, moving toward the mantel. He adjusted one of the photographs, the one of Hazel, then set his hand on the frame for a long moment. "I suppose I kept it because I didn't want to forget," he said quietly. Not her face, not the feeling of helping. After Lila died, I stopped believing in big gestures. Sometimes the smallest kindness, a sandwich, a smile, means more than anything grand. Erin watched him. There was no defensiveness in his tone, only weary honesty, the kind that comes after years of carrying sorrow you've made peace with but never escaped. "Do you ever feel," she asked softly, "like you're still trying to save the child you lost?" He looked out the window, where mist still hung low over the street. "Every day," he admitted. "But it's not about saving her anymore. It's about doing right by the world she left behind." The words settled between them like dust in sunlight. Slow, steady, impossible to ignore. Erin closed her notebook. "You know, Hazel told me she was afraid to tell her mother. Thought she'd get you in trouble." A sad smile crossed his face. "That's the thing about children. They think truth is dangerous. Maybe we taught them that." For a long moment, neither spoke. The clock ticked softly, the air filled with the faint smell of mint tea and rain-soaked earth. Erin looked again at the picture of Lila. It was taken on the first day of school, judging by the backpack and the nervous smile. Beneath the frame, tucked halfway under the edge, was something she hadn't noticed before, a folded letter, yellowed with age. She hesitated. "May I?" He nodded. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. "Dear Daddy, thank you for driving the bus even when it rains. I like watching you wave to the kids. You make them feel safe. Love, Lila." Erin's chest tightened. She read the words twice before setting the note back down. "She must have loved you a lot." Hayes didn't speak. He just pressed his thumb gently over his daughter's name as if to keep it from fading. "You see," he said after a moment, "I thought if I could make one more child feel safe, I'd be keeping her alive somehow. I didn't realize it might frighten them instead." Erin stood and walked to the window. Outside, school buses rolled along the wet streets, their reflections shimmering in puddles. "You can still fix this," she said quietly. "Hazel's young. She'll understand if you explain. Children forgive faster than we do." Hayes nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right." He reached into a small drawer near the mantel and pulled out a brown lunch bag. On it, written in neat black marker, were the words, "For Hazel, extra, today." He smiled faintly. "I was planning to leave it at the school office. No more switching lunches, no more secrets." Erin returned his smile. "That's a good start." They stood there in silence a while, watching sunlight creep higher up the walls. The moment felt fragile, like peace rediscovered, too delicate to touch. Finally, Erin turned toward the door. "I'll let the school know everything's been cleared. You won't be facing any charges, Mr. Hayes. But maybe you should come by later to talk with Hazel and her mother just to make things right." He nodded. "I will." As she stepped out onto the porch, the mountain breeze carried the scent of wet cedar and early spring. Erin paused, glancing back through the window. Hayes was still there, standing beside the photo of his daughter. But now, his hand rested on both frames, Lila's and Hazel's, side by side. For the first time, they looked less like two ghosts and more like a promise. Down the road, the sound of children's laughter floated through the air, carried by the wind. Erin smiled faintly, sliding her notebook into her jacket pocket. Some truths didn't need to be written down. They just needed to be lived. The next afternoon carried the soft warmth of early spring. Sunlight spilled over the hills outside Asheville, drying the last traces of rain from the cracked sidewalks. The school buses glowed yellow under the light as they hummed along the quiet roads. Detective Erin Calloway parked across from Maple Grove Elementary, her hands resting on the steering wheel for a long minute. Through the windshield, she could see the playground swings moving slowly in the breeze, a handful of children running across the field, their laughter ringing through the air. It was a good day for new beginnings, she thought. Inside the school office, Grace Quinn was waiting, still in her light blue hospital scrubs, her dark hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked like she hadn't slept much. Her hands twisted the strap of her purse again and again, the nervous rhythm of a mother caught between work and worry. When Erin entered, Grace stood quickly. "Detective, thank you for calling me. I don't know what to say. Hazel told me she called 911, and I nearly fainted when I heard why." Erin offered a small smile. "You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Quinn. Hazel's safe, and that's what matters. We just thought it might help for you and Mr. Hayes to talk in person. Clear the air." Grace exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing a little. "I don't want trouble for him. I just want my little girl to feel safe on that bus." A gentle knock came at the door. Mr. Hayes stepped inside, hat in hand, the lines on his face softened by the afternoon light. He gave a polite nod. "Mrs. Quinn, detective." Grace hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't know what to think. Hazel said you took her lunch. She was scared." He nodded. "I know, and I'm sorry." The silence stretched, filled only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Erin stepped back, letting the two of them speak. Hayes took a seat, his voice low but steady. "I didn't mean to frighten her. I just thought, if I could help without embarrassing her, maybe it'd make things easier. I've seen her sit quiet all the way to school, holding that small sandwich like it was enough. I should have asked first." Grace's eyes glistened. "You were trying to help?" "Yes, ma'am." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes people just need a little help staying proud." Grace covered her mouth, blinking fast. "I've been working double shifts at the hospital. Sometimes I leave before sunrise, come home after Hazel's asleep. I pack her lunch every morning, but—" Her voice cracked. "I didn't realize how little it really was." Erin placed a comforting hand on her arm. "You're doing your best, Grace. No one's blaming you." Hayes leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Hazel's a good kid, kind-hearted. Reminds me of my own little girl." Grace looked up. "You have a daughter?" "I did." His eyes softened. "She passed a few years ago. Same age as Hazel now." Grace's expression gentled. The weight of shared exhaustion and loss filled the space between them, two strangers, suddenly connected by something deeper than circumstance. From down the hall, the classroom doors opened, releasing a flood of children's voices. Hazel's laugh carried faintly through the noise, and both adults turned instinctively toward the sound. A moment later, the little girl appeared at the door, holding a half-painted art project and blinking in surprise at the sight of them. "Mom? Mr. Hayes?" Grace crouched to her level, arms open. "Come here, sweetheart." Hazel ran into her embrace, clutching her mother tightly. "I didn't mean to get anyone in trouble," she said in a small voice. "I was just so hungry." Grace's tears fell onto her daughter's hair. "Oh, baby, you did the right thing. You were brave." Hazel looked up at Hayes timidly. "You're not mad at me?" He shook his head with a kind smile. "Not one bit. You did exactly what you should have done. You asked for help when something didn't feel right. That takes courage." Hazel frowned. "But why did you take my sandwich?" Hayes reached into his bag and pulled out a brown lunch sack. On the front, in neat handwriting, it said, "For Hazel. Extra today." He handed it to her. "Because I thought I was helping. But now I know the best way to help is to tell the truth first." Hazel opened the bag slowly. Inside was a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a small carton of milk. Her eyes widened. "You made this?" He nodded. "The same way your mama does, only this time. You can eat it without worry." The girl smiled shyly and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." He smiled back. "You're welcome, kiddo. And next time, if you're ever hungry, you come tell me, or your teacher, or your mama. Promise?" She nodded solemnly. "Promise." The moment was so simple, so quiet, that Erin felt her throat tighten. No courtroom, no headline, just three people finding forgiveness in a sunlit schoolroom. Outside, a warm breeze stirred the American flag above the playground. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and chalk dust. Life, in its small way, was mending itself. Later that day, the three of them found themselves seated inside Maple Street Cafe, a small diner near the edge of town where the windows were always fogged from coffee, steam, and laughter. The kind of place where the waitress knew every regular by name and the jukebox still played old country songs from the 70s. Grace had insisted on paying for the meal, but Hayes shook his head. "My treat," he said gently. "You've been keeping this town running longer than most of us." The waitress, a plump woman named Doris with a bright red apron, poured refills and smiled at Hazel. "You want whipped cream on your cocoa, sweetheart?" Hazel nodded shyly. "Yes, please." Doris winked, coming right up. Erin sat with them at the booth. Not in uniform now, just a woman sharing a quiet meal. The tension that had filled the school earlier was gone, replaced by the gentle murmur of conversation and the smell of grilled cheese and apple pie. Hazel swung her legs under the table, watching as Mr. Hayes stirred his tea with slow precision.
"Mr. Hayes," she asked softly, "what was your little girl's name?"
He hesitated, then smiled. "Lila. That's a pretty name. M. It was," he said, his eyes drifting toward the window. "She used to sit right where you are now. Always ordered the same thing, hot chocolate with too much whipped cream." Hazel giggled. "Like me." He nodded. "Exactly like you." For a moment, time seemed to fold over itself. The sound of rain from yesterday was gone, replaced by the warmth of sunlight glinting off the diner's chrome counters. It was as if the world had paused to give them a moment of peace. Grace reached across the table and rested her hand over Hayes's. "Thank you for caring about my daughter," she said softly. "I know your heart was in the right place." He blinked fast, surprised by the touch. "You don't owe me thanks. I just did what I wish someone had done for my Lila." Hazel looked between them, sensing something tender but not quite understanding it. "Do you miss her?" she asked. "Every day," he admitted. "But days like this make it hurt a little less." Hazel reached into her backpack and pulled out a small drawing folded in half. She slid it across the table toward him. "Here," she said shyly. "It's you and me on the bus. I can draw your daughter too if you want." Hayes unfolded the paper carefully. Crayon lines filled the page, bright yellow bus, 2 stick figures smiling in the front seats, a third smaller one holding a sandwich. His voice caught in his throat. "It's perfect," he whispered. Grace smiled through her tears. "She draws better than I ever could." "Better than me too," Hayes said, his voice trembling but full of warmth. He tucked the drawing carefully into his coat pocket like something sacred. "I'll keep it by Lila's picture." Hazel grinned. "Then she won't be lonely anymore." Something in those words struck deep. Grace's eyes softened, and even Erin found herself blinking away a tear. Outside, the wind stirred the bell above the diner door, letting in a sliver of golden light. Doris returned with Hazel's cocoa, whipped cream piled high like a little cloud. "Here you go, sweetheart. Careful, it's hot." "Thank you," Hazel said, wrapping both hands around the warm mug. They lingered for a long while, talking about small things, Hazel's favorite subject at school, Grace's night shifts, the mountain trails Mr. Hayes used to hike with his daughter. There was laughter now, soft and genuine, the kind that fills the cracks left by old pain. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, Erin glanced around the table at the tired mother, the child with chocolate on her lip, and the old bus driver whose eyes had found light again. This, she thought, is what redemption looks like. Not grand gestures or courtroom victories, but moments like this, quiet, humble, human. When they finally stood to leave, Hazel waved at Doris, who called after her, "Y'all come back soon." In the parking lot, the air smelled of rain and coffee. Grace took Hazel's hand, and Mr. Hayes stood beside them, hat in hand, as if reluctant to break the spell. "Mr. Hayes," Hazel said, looking up, "can I still wave at you from the bus tomorrow?" He smiled, his eyes bright. "I'll be waving right back, kiddo." As they said goodbye, Erin lingered by her car, watching them walk away, 3 figures against the fading light. Hayes turned toward his old pickup, pausing once to glance through the diner window, where the reflection of a little girl in a summer dress seemed to flicker for just a moment beside Hazel's image. Then he smiled, and the reflection faded with the sunset. The news spread quietly at first, like morning fog rolling through the streets of Asheville. A story told from neighbor to neighbor, whispered at the diner counter, repeated in the aisles of the grocery store. A little girl called 911 because she was hungry. A bus driver took her lunch, not to harm, but to help. By the end of the week, everyone knew. And for the first time in a long while, the small mountain town seemed to pause and look inward. At Mission Health Hospital, nurses on the night shift left extra sandwiches in the break room labeled "For Hazel's Friends." At the Maple Street Diner, Doris placed a cardboard box near the register with a hand-drawn sign. Lunches for little ones, take what you need, leave what you can. Even the local high school students started collecting snacks, stacking them neatly in brown paper bags. Detective Erin Calloway watched it all unfold from the steps of the town hall one cool morning, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The story she'd once thought of as small a misunderstanding on a rainy day had become something bigger, something good. Across the street, Mr. Hayes was climbing down from his bus, the morning sunlight glinting off its polished yellow sides. He'd washed it himself the night before. On the back window, taped neatly behind the driver's seat, was a new sign written in Hazel's handwriting. Be kind. Someone might need your lunch. Erin smiled. The letters were uneven, but the message was clear. A group of parents stood nearby, talking quietly. Some had come to thank Hayes in person, bringing muffins or small notes of gratitude. Others simply wanted to see the man whose simple act had made them rethink how they looked at one another. Grace Quinn arrived a few minutes later, still in scrubs, her hair damp from a quick shower. Hazel ran ahead of her, waving at the bus. "Mr. Hayes," she called. "We brought something." He turned, smiling as the little girl handed him a lunchbox bright pink covered in stickers. "That's for you," she said proudly. "Mom helped me make sandwiches." He opened it and chuckled. "Looks like you packed enough for both of us." "That's the point," Hazel beamed. "You helped me, so now I get to help you." Grace's eyes shimmered. "We wanted to say thank you again," she said softly. "You reminded me that there's no shame in needing help and no kindness too small to matter." Hayes bowed his head slightly. "Your little girl reminded me too." From the sidewalk, Erin watched the three of them together, the mother, the daughter, and the man who'd once been a stranger bound by grief. It was strange, she thought, how one act of misunderstanding had turned into a chain of compassion. Later that morning, the principal of Maple Grove Elementary gathered the students in the auditorium. Hazel sat in the front row, legs swinging, while Mr. Hayes stood beside the microphone, looking more nervous than he had in 20 years behind the wheel. "Kids," the principal began, "sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they just drive buses and make sure you get to school safe and fed. Mr. Hayes reminded us that we all have the power to care for each other." The applause was soft at first, then grew louder, filling the room with the kind of warmth that can only come from sincerity. Hayes's face turned pink with embarrassment. Hazel grinned from her seat. "That's my bus driver," she shouted proudly, and the crowd laughed. After the assembly, Erin found herself standing near the back wall, hand pressed over her chest. She'd seen countless investigations end in disappointment, but not this one. This was different. This was what justice could look like when it was painted in compassion instead of punishment. Outside, spring sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering gold over the wet pavement. The world seemed a little brighter, the air a little lighter, and for the first time in a long time, Asheville felt like a place where people remembered what mattered. By the following week, Asheville felt different. Not louder, not busier, just softer, like the town itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. At Maple Grove Elementary, the cafeteria now had a new sign painted by the art teacher and her students. In bold letters it read, "The kindness table, take what you need. Share what you can." Every morning, kids dropped off granola bars, apples, and small notes for anyone who might need a snack. Some notes said, "Have a great day," or "You're not alone." No one knew exactly who started it, but everyone suspected Hazel and her bus driver. The local newspaper ran the story on a quiet Sunday. The headline read, "The bus driver who gave away a sandwich and fed a town." Mr. Hayes didn't see himself as a hero. He told every reporter the same thing. It was never about sandwiches. It was about noticing. Detective Erin Calloway kept the clipping in her case file. When she filed her final report, she added a handwritten note at the bottom. Something she'd never done before. Sometimes the smallest calls lead to the biggest answers. That afternoon, she visited the churchyard by Miller Street, where the big oak tree stood. The same one where Hazel had hidden on that rainy day. Now, tied to its trunk, was a little wooden plaque made by the high school woodshop students. It read, "For those who are brave enough to ask for help and those kind enough to listen." Erin touched the smooth wood, smiling quietly to herself. She thought of Hazel's trembling voice on the line, of Mr. Hayes' weary kindness, of a mother working through exhaustion to do her best, lives crossing by accident, changing one another in ways no report could measure. Down the street, the yellow school bus turned the corner, slowing near the church. Erin watched as it stopped, and the door opened with a familiar hiss. Hazel climbed aboard, waving her small hand out the window. Mr. Hayes waved back, just as he did every morning now. Inside, the bus smelled faintly of crayons and fresh bread. The children laughed, their voices bright, echoing through the seats. Hayes glanced in the rearview mirror and caught Hazel's reflection smiling back at him. It reminded him of another face, a memory both painful and sweet. He tapped the mirror gently and whispered, "Morning, Lila." The bus rolled forward, sunlight flickering through the trees. The same road that once carried loss now carried laughter. The same driver who once drove alone now carried hope in every seat. When they passed the diner, Doris waved from the doorway, holding up a fresh pie. At the grocery store corner, two boys set out a box of donated snacks. The town had changed, not by miracle, but by memory, by remembering that kindness could begin anywhere, even in a lunchbox. At the next stop, Hazel leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yes, kiddo?" "My mom says we're going to help at the food drive this weekend. Do you want to come?" He smiled through the mirror. "Wouldn't miss it." As the bus turned down the hill, sunlight broke across the windshield, painting everything in gold. The oak tree at Miller Street stood quietly behind them, its leaves trembling in the breeze, its roots deep in the same earth that now carried a town's gratitude. A year passed. The seasons turned gently over Asheville spring to summer, summer to the amber hush of fall. The little town changed in small, tender ways. The kindness table at the school became a daily ritual. The diner's donation box was never empty. And on the corner of Miller Street, the old oak tree stood prouder than ever, its branches spreading wide over the cracked sidewalk like arms holding the town together. On a mild Saturday morning, Detective Erin Calloway walked toward that tree, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. The air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 10. Beneath the tree stood Leonard Hayes, his gray jacket buttoned up against the early autumn chill. His bus keys dangled from his belt. Glinting in the Sunday time had softened him. The heaviness that once haunted his shoulders now felt lighter, replaced by quiet purpose. "You're early," Erin said with a smile, handing him a cup. He chuckled. "Old habits. You drive a bus for 20 years. You learn to be early or get left behind." They sat on the bench beneath the oak, the same spot where Hazel had once hidden, crying. The plaque at the base of the tree gleamed in the morning light. Erin ran her fingers over the engraving. "For those who are brave enough to ask for help, and those kind enough to listen. She comes by every Friday," Hayes said softly. "Hazel. Leaves flowers here after school. Little wild daisies she picks by the creek." Erin smiled. "She's growing up fast." "Yeah. Started helping her mom at the community pantry now. Says she's saving up to buy a lunchbox for another kid who doesn't have one." Erin took a sip of coffee. "Seems she learned well. Hayes looked toward the road, where the school bus glimmered in the Sunday. "Maybe. I think she taught me more than I ever taught her." The breeze stirred the leaves overhead, making them shimmer like coins of light. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, it was full. The kind of quiet that feels like peace earned the hard way. "Finally," Erin said. "I never asked why here. Why this tree?" He smiled faintly. "This was the place I stopped the day after Lila's funeral. I parked the bus and sat right here. Couldn't bring myself to drive another mile. Thought maybe I was done. But when I looked up at this tree, I thought, if something this old can keep growing through storms, maybe I can too." Erin's gaze softened. "You have," he nodded. "I like to think so, but I don't think I did it alone." The sound of laughter drifted down the street. Hazel, now 8, walking hand in hand with her mother. Grace carried a basket filled with sandwiches for the weekend food drive. Hazel spotted them and ran ahead, her ponytail bouncing, her shoes scattering fallen leaves. "Mr. Hayes, Detective Erin," she shouted. "Guess what? We made peanut butter sandwiches for everyone this time." Erin laughed. "Everyone?" "Yep, even you," Hazel said proudly, handing each of them a sandwich wrapped in foil. "Mom says sharing is like a chain. If you pass it long enough, it reaches everyone. Hayes accepted his with a smile that reached his eyes. That's a fine philosophy. Grace caught up, a little out of breath, but smiling. We're headed to the park for the food drive. Thought we'd stop by to say hi. I'm glad you did, Hayes said warmly. The four of them stood together beneath the oak tree, the sunlight filtering through branches that swayed like slow music. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of wind, laughter, and the low hum of life carrying on. Erin looked at Hayes. You ever think about retiring? He smiled. Every day. But then I remember how many kids still need rides, and how many lunches still need delivering. Hazel grinned. You can't retire until I'm in middle school. He laughed. Well, that settles it then. The moment hung golden and easy, the kind of small happiness that doesn't announce itself but stays long after it's gone. Evening settled softly over Asheville, wrapping the town in shades of amber and lilac. The last bus of the day rumbled down Willow Creek Road, its windows glowing gold against the fading sky. Behind the wheel sat Leonard Hayes, humming quietly to himself, the way he always did when the world felt right. The children had all gone home. The seats behind him were empty now, but still full of echoes, laughter, stories, the sound of sneakers tapping the floor. He kept glancing at the mirror, as if expecting to see Hazel's small face there, waving at him through the reflection. At the corner of Miller Street, he slowed the bus to a stop. The oak tree stood there, leaves shimmering like coins in the evening light. He turned off the engine, and the world fell into a hush broken only by crickets and the soft ticking of the cooling motor. For a long time, he just sat there, watching the way sunlight filtered through the branches, remembering. He remembered Lila's laugh, her tiny hand gripping his finger as they crossed the street. He remembered the day she was gone, the silence afterward that filled his house and his heart for years. And he remembered Hazel, how she taught him that kindness doesn't always heal the past, but it can light the road forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out two things, a faded photograph of Lila and Hazel's crayon drawing the yellow bus. The three stick figures smiling under a big sundae. He placed them side by side on the dashboard. You'd like her, Lila, he said softly. She's got your courage, and that same way of forgiving too easily. His voice wavered, then steadied. Guess your old man finally did something right. A small smile touched his lips. He stayed there until the streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting halos across the quiet road. Then, with the ease of long habit, he started the engine again. The bus rolled forward slowly, turning toward the depot. From a distance, the headlights brushed across the plaque beneath the oak tree, its letters gleaming briefly in the dusk. For those who are brave enough to ask for help and those kind enough to listen. Later that week, on the local radio station, a familiar voice spoke over the gentle hum of evening jazz. Detective Erin Calloway had been invited to share the story, what the host called The Miracle on Miller Street. Her voice was calm, steady, carrying that comforting warmth that makes listeners lean closer. It began with a frightened little girl and a single peanut butter sandwich, she said. But it became something far greater, a reminder that the smallest acts can mend entire towns. We often think heroes wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they just drive school buses, cut the crust off sandwiches, and remember to wave back. A pause. The soft sound of the oak leaves rustling faded in under her words. For those listening tonight, I hope you remember this. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it can change what tomorrow feels like. And sometimes, asking for help isn't weakness. It's the first step toward saving someone else. The music swelled, low and tender. Somewhere out on Willow Creek Road, the headlights of a yellow bus glowed faintly in the distance, disappearing over the hill. Inside, taped to the mirror, Hazel's drawing fluttered in the warm night air. And under the great oak tree, a small bouquet of wild daisies rested at its base, left by a little girl who still believed that kindness, once planted, never stops growing. Sometimes, when the evening light falls just right over the town of Asheville, you can still see the golden outline of that yellow school bus turning the corner by Miller Street. The great oak tree stands there, its branches whispering softly in the wind, as if holding every secret this town has ever learned. Beneath it once hid a frightened little girl, clutching her lunchbox and her courage. And beneath it, a tired old man rediscovered what it meant to care again. That's the thing about life. It has a way of bringing two broken pieces together so they can make each other whole. The story of Hazel and Mr. Hayes isn't about heroes or villains. It's about ordinary people finding grace in the quiet corners of their days. A child who dared to ask for help, and a man who'd spent years trying to make peace with his past. Their paths crossed not in grand gestures, but in small acts, a shared sandwich, a single phone call, a wave from a bus window. And somehow, those simple things stitched a whole town back together. For those of us listening tonight, maybe we've known our own versions of Miller Street. Maybe we've had seasons when pride kept us from asking for help, or when we were too busy to notice someone sitting quietly in need. But stories like this remind us that kindness doesn't always change the world at once. It changes one person at a time, one moment at a time. And if we're lucky, we get to see the ripple it leaves behind. In a world that moves too fast, where people rush past each other in grocery lines or drive-thrus, it's easy to forget how much power lives in a simple gesture, a smile, a meal shared, a word of understanding. Yet those are the things that hold communities together long after the noise fades. Just like the oak tree, standing firm through storms and seasons, kindness roots itself quietly, growing deeper each time someone chooses to care. The heart of this story is redemption, not the kind written in grand speeches or courtroom endings, but the quiet redemption of an aging man who found meaning again, and a mother who realized she didn't have to carry the world alone. It's about a little girl who learned that asking for help is not weakness, it's bravery in its purest form. And it's about a town that remembered who it was when it chose compassion over judgment. So, as you sit by your window tonight, maybe with the smell of coffee brewing or the sound of your old clock ticking in the next room, I invite you to think of that bus driver, that little girl, and the oak tree that still stands. Think of the people who once offered you a hand when you needed it most. And maybe, just maybe, pass that kindness forward before the day is done. Because in the end, love doesn't ask for much. It just asks to be passed along, like a warm meal on a cold day, or a soft light left on for someone still finding their way home. And if this story has touched you tonight, leave a small sign, press 1 inch, the comment, so we'll know it found your heart. If you think we can tell it better next time, press 0, because kindness also means listening. Life gives us many roads to travel, but only a few that lead us back to each other. And when you find those roads, when you find your own Miller Street, hold on to them and to the people who walk beside you. After all, the oak tree still stands, just as strong as ever. And so does every act of love we leave behind.